I think we're at 7 o'clock now, so maybe. Awesome.
So we are live.
We're live. Cool. Should I start, or will we wait a few minutes maybe just to see if more people come into the thing?
Maybe 2 more minutes.
Cool. Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, I think cats are kind of amazing though. I love them. Yeah, I love my cats. They're great fun. To anybody joining on the YouTube live stream, we're just talking about cats. Yeah, they're very inspirational to me as a filmmaker. Yeah.
In which way?
I don't know. I think they're just like really interesting creatures. They're just like very surreal, kind of mysterious. Like I think, you know, how they're kind of revered in ancient Egypt as like guardians of the underworld and stuff. I think they're just kind of mysterious and, you know, yeah, just kind of otherworldly. Like, you know, witches have them as familiars. Like, I think they're just generally kind of cool creatures, and it's amazing you can like have them in your own home because they kind of feel like they're a bit wild and feral in some ways a lot of the time. But yeah.
Nice.
Oh. Oh.
Whenever you're ready.
Cool. Will I just go for it? Start, and we'll just maybe more people will join shortly. Cool. Well, my name is Kate Dolan, and I'm a writer director. I mainly work in the horror genre now, but that's kind of not always been the case. So I guess today I'm just kind of gonna talk through my experience.
Ready?
Oh. Cool. Will I just go for it? Start. So weird. Where's that coming from? That is freaky.
We're talking about horror films. So
well, I'm a writer director. Where is that coming from? I make.
Now it's okay.
Yeah. Was that coming from you, or
I think it was coming from my computer.
Freaky.
Perfect. Nice.
Cool. Yeah. All right. But anyway, that was a bit weird. Yeah. So basically, I'm just gonna kind of talk today a little bit about kind of my experience and how I got from, you know, coming out of film school to now being a feature film writer and director, specifically within the horror genre, but kind of just general ups and downs of life experience so far. So yeah, I guess I'll start with how I kind of started in the industry, or how I kind of started before I started in the industry. So essentially I like always really wanted to be a filmmaker, and it was always something that really interested me, to the point that when I was a kid, I like, so obviously coming from like a Irish Catholic background, I made my communion and confirmation, which are kind of sacraments you have to make within your, you know, Irish Catholicism. And the kind of good thing about those things is that you get given money by people and for people when you make your communion, your confirmation. So I got given some money from when I was kind of 8 to 11, and kind of through saving that up and saving up kind of pocket money when I was about 11, I bought myself a kind of high 8 camera, which I actually have here. So that was like this big chunky camera.
Nice.
Yeah, which was spent all my money, no, not a penny left, to my mother's horror. So she was kind of disgusted that I had basically spent all my saved up money for my communion and confirmation on a camera. Um, but then I started making like little movies with my friends. I didn't know how to get them off the camera really onto a computer because we didn't have a computer, number one. But I would just kind of like play around with the camera and make little films within the tape, so then like you could play them onto the TV with a little cable. So we would just kind of watch them, me and my friends, and they were always just like really silly, like horror movies that barely made any sense.
So you have a script.
Kind of. We used to just kind of riff a little bit. We would kind of write down a rough script, but it didn't really, follow much coherent thought. But yeah. So then, kind of from years of doing a bit of that and like just kind of messing around, I really wanted to be a filmmaker and go to film school. And I knew that IADT, the National Film School in IADT in Dunleary, was kind of the like one of the places that you go to do that, to study, because there wasn't many around. So again, to like my guidance counselor's horror was basically would only put film on my CAO form, and she was like, please put down other things, because you like, what if you don't get it, or what if you don't, like, it's not a very reputable career. But I kind of stuck with my guns and decided to do it, and luckily I did get into IDT, so that's where I studied from 2008 to 2012.
Mhm.
And that was like a really good experience in terms of meeting my peers, and there's people who were in my class that I still work with today that we all kind of came up and got our experience together, which is really nice. And so within that course I majored in directing and minored in editing towards the end of the course. So that was I always knew I kind of wanted to be directing. They kind of Writing wasn't as big of a kind of a thing for me in college. I knew I wanted to direct because they kind of made us all take different roles when we were doing projects and stuff like that. So I kind of focused on directing and didn't really focus on the writing as much, because the writers were very much in their class of writers and that's what they solely focused on. So they didn't get to direct very much. So I did that, and then when I kind of graduated, I made a graduate short film called Breathe In, which was I wanted it to be kind of more of a ghost story. But in film school we were kind of turned off the idea of doing genre or like horror, because I think at the time the films that were coming out were not seen as kind of prestige horror. They would have been more kind of, torture porn movies and those kind of like Hostel and Saw and that kind of stuff. So I don't think our lecturers kind of saw that as something that would get you into a film festival or something that would be seen as like, prestige or, win you a prize at a film festival kind of thing. So they really kind of turned us away from doing that, and pointed us more towards drama, because that was kind of where you kind of would see more success, I suppose, in that line of things. And then, yeah, so then when I graduated from there, my graduate film was successful enough. Like, we played a good few film festivals, and it was, a good experience to kind of get to go to those things, and like the Galway Film Fla and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't really have an aim of what I wanted to do or how to kind of do what I wanted to do. So I felt very kind of lost at that point and didn't really know how you get from here, which is kind of like, as Ollie was saying, the kind of chapter one or like, the first page of your story to kind of where you want to be, because you're kind of seeing people who are making things much further in their careers and like how to do that. So I really just kind of wanted to have work to do in any kind of way, like anything that would kind of keep me busy or just, get me some involvement in any way to the kind of film industry. So I kind of did bits and bobs and odd jobs of like, working as an art department trainee or as a production trainee on like commercials, or, I was lucky that a production company that I had kind of got to know the producer of while I was in college, she had given me summertime work in her company in my last summer before college was over. And so she kind of knew me, so she gave me kind of nixers here and there that would keep me getting paid some money and just kind of learning as well while I could. So that was really good. But I really wanted a job. I just wanted something that like I could go to every day, because I felt like kind of aimless. And I had quit my job in the video shop in my final year of college. I used to work in Extravision because I wanted to focus on kind of my final year of college and just getting everything done for it. So I quit that job, and I kind of couldn't get back into that job because all the video shops were closing, unfortunately. So I actually made a kind of a friend of mine, he had a DSLR camera that he had bought in his final year of college, and there was a competition to do a kind of an ad for reachout.com about mental health. So we took his camera and we just got a bunch of people we knew to act in it. And I had an idea about basically following people around, and they look like they're having a good time, but like text next to their head says what they're really thinking or internal problems that they're having. And we just about pulled it off. I paid a little bit of money to a guy to do the kind of graphics that were coming beside their head. But we made it for basically nothing. But then the film won the competition that I made it for, and the prize of the competition was some money, which was great, because I didn't have any money at the time. But it was also, the prize was an internship in an advertising agency. So I went in there and I started working in the broadcast department of that agency, and learned a lot about commercials and advertising, and was in there kind of 9 till 5 every day, and met a lot of people through working there. And it was great to kind of have a place to work in, but I always felt like I was kind of not where I should be, if you know what I mean. Like I always really wanted to be a filmmaker, and it kind of felt like I was getting locked into this role post college. So while I was there, I started writing a script which was called Little Doll, which was based on kind of my personal experience as a queer woman, or like a kid coming of age who kind of like realizes they might be queer, or like their sexuality might be different, by just kind of a crush that they have on like a peer of theirs at a sleepover they're at. And it's very innocuous, it's very kind of innocent film, but the themes are obviously about kind of like people who kind of understand that their sexuality might be different at an age that they're kind of too young to understand that that's the case. So I basically wrote that script and sent it around to a few funding bodies in Ireland, but I think the content might have been not quite what they wanted at the time. I think it was just a bit too kind of, it just wasn't their thing. So I then was at a loss, and I kind of was like, maybe this filmmaking thing is never going to work. So I had heard about the, like, obviously big film festivals in Europe and that kind of thing, and I knew the Berlinale Film Festival, which obviously like is one of the biggest film festivals in Europe. They have a talent campus as part of the festival called Berlinale Talents. So it's kind of for, up and coming and emerging people to, just kind of go to the festival, not necessarily even, there's like lots of workshops and that kind of thing, but it's mainly about networking and kind of getting to know people and getting to be at the festival and see films and all that kind of stuff. And they, there are a lot of talents who, you know, start out at Berlinale talents and then go on to like make great movies. So I knew about this scheme, and like it was totally just like on a whim. I think I was like very desperate at that point to like just get any kind of break into film that I wanted to. Just I was kind of submitting to everything. It was like anything that I could kind of submit to, I did. And so Berlinale Talents was on the list, but they had a section where with your talents application, you could add a project that you wanted to kind of highlight, because they had a short film script station. So it was like a script workshop for short films. So 10 projects got selected for that short film script station every year. And I kind of just added Little Doll as like a kind of, I'll just add it to my application. It might like help my kind of, you know, show that I'm working on something, because my grad film had been kind of, you know, 2 years ago at that stage. And so I just added this script I'd written on, and then I got in and I got into the short film script station. So a selection of 10, which is amazing. Like at Berlinale Talents, there's like hundreds of participants. So it was like really cool to be within that kind of workshop group, because you got to go every day and actually like have one-on-one mentorships with people, and the other people in the group, like some of them I'm still in contact with now, and they're like really talented. So it was just like an amazing experience, and I think that really reignited my kind of idea that this could happen, and like a career in filmmaking could be something that I could actually get to eventually. So it was kind of like the next step, which was really cool.
Yeah, I thought that I think that you then you realize that you're not on the first page anymore. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. You're like the next step up.
Yeah.
So that was like just amazing experience, and like being at the festival alone was like just, you know, it's such a huge festival, like so much stuff on, and there's so many people, and there's so many kind of different levels of people there, like superstar film actors that you'll see walking down the street, but then also just like peers of your level who are making short films, who I met through talents, who, you know, producers and other directors, and, you know, all that kind of stuff, which was, you know, amazing. And then so I came back from that, and I felt like I really wanted to give filmmaking a shot, because I felt like this script, it has been kind of Berlinale approved and they like it, and I've been in this workshop with them, so I want to make it, and I want to kind of give it this directing thing a shot. So then I left my job at the ad agency, and I kind of saved up money, which was a good thing, because I, you know, obviously going out to do something like that, it's a bit of a leap of faith, and you don't know how you're going to like make your income. And like I obviously had my editing skills and that kind of stuff, so I had some nixers that I could do while I was kind of waiting to make my film, because basically we had to crowdfund to get the film made that had been at the short film script station. So the script, we had a great script that had been obviously like a mentor had kind of helped me improve it and make it really work. And then so now it was like, how do we do this? How do we get it made? So the film only starred kind of 5, 8 to 10-year-old girls. So we casted them, and then we used the producer's house that she was living in with other people to film it in. And we kind of rented some camera equipment and that kind of thing, but we really didn't like make it for very much money at all. We kind of raised about €3,000 on Indiegogo at the time to make the movie. So we just had a lot of people rowing in who were working for free, or film students who, you know, wanted experience and that kind of stuff. So it was a real just like labor of love to get it done. And then we basically, that film was edited for a long time, and luckily within that time I had kind of done nixers and kind of stuff where a friend of mine, me and him, he had a camera, so he would shoot stuff, I would be able to edit it. So we had a kind of good little thing going, where basically some companies that wanted to do stuff with freelancers to just make kind of online content or corporate videos, we did a few of those kind of things. And through that I got represented by a commercials production company. So that their name was Jumper Productions, and the producer there was Fiona Kinsella, and she had known me from before. I had done some kind of work with her when I was a student, so she has known me for a really long time. So she really took a chance to kind of put me on her books as like a commercials director. And she was very kind to do that, because I think it kind of really helped me get to a next level of just being able to do some commercials that then were, you know, TV commercials. So you're getting paid actual like proper money, and, you know, you're getting experience on set, but it's kind of compacted, you know, over the course of 1 or 2 days. It's not like a long film shoot. So you're getting experience, but it's kind of over a very short amount of time. So I think that really helped me learn my craft over, you know, short kind of bursts of making things.
But did you enjoy make commercials?
I think commercials are a strange fish. They can be really enjoyable, and I think the process of them is so fast paced, which I really enjoy. I do find the like creative lack of creative control sometimes can be frustrating, I think, as a filmmaker, because you're used to kind of creating things in exactly in the image in your mind, or like how you want to do it. But obviously with commercials, you've got a whole team, you've got clients who want a certain thing, and then you've got a creative team from that agencies that want a thing, and then you are just kind of interpreting that for
that's
them.
what I mean, that they
Yeah,
have a lot of limits and restrictions, I think.
yeah, I think it, like, you know, you can have jobs which are very creative and a lot of fun, but yeah, they can be a bit restrictive sometimes, I think. Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, they are there to kind of like do a certain thing, so they have to serve a certain purpose. So you can't obviously get too abstract or experimental in that space, because they have to kind of at the end of the day sell the product or show the product, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. So you do have limitations in that way, I suppose. But yeah, so then I did a bit of work in that kind of commercial space for a while, and then luckily within that time we finished Little Doll and got it edited. And then we submitted the film to some film festivals, and it actually had its premiere at Berlinale 2016. So it was 2 years after I had been at Talents that we actually got the film there. And that's where it had its world premiere. So that was a great start for us, because the producer of that film I actually had met in college. So she was like, you know, me and her had really kind of struggled to get it made and just get it finished. And, you know, it was quite a DIY movie in a way. So it was kind of amazing to have such a big premiere at a, you know, a major festival like that, because it just opened so many doors for you. You know, if you get your world premiere at a big festival like that, you will get requests for other festivals, you know, waivers, so you don't have to pay to get into your next festival, and like people who want to see your film, and you'll get emails saying like, can you send us your film please, and all this kind of stuff. So it just like, you know, opens the doors so much. Yeah, it's just like kind of has a knock-on effect, which is you know, really, it's really great. You know, that's kind of what you want as a filmmaker, just see that, you know, your film is being seen and it's getting around, it's actually getting an audience. So Little Doll, yeah, did a good few kind of film festivals after that, which was great. And it won a couple of prizes at different film festivals as well. The actress won a prize, and then it won best short film at a children's film festival in Europe. And that again was just like another kind of door opening experience, because through the word of mouth, I suppose, of Little Doll being at Berlinale and doing kind of a good festival run, even though we had self-funded it and it was kind of an independent film in many, like, you know, massively, Screen Ireland knew then that I had made that film and it had been at Berlinale. I think the year we were at Berlinale, I think it was maybe the only Irish film that played in the whole of Berlinale. So that was like a great thing, because then you kind of have that badge on your, you know, you say your CV, but you don't really use CVs in film. But it's kind of like, you know, people go, oh, you got into that with your film and your film is good. Okay, well, now maybe we can trust you by giving you some actual like funding to make something bigger. So basically that's kind of what happened then. After that, we were really lucky that then so at the end of 2017 or to end of 2016, I submitted an idea to Screen Ireland to do it through their focus short scheme. So they just kind of changed the short filmmaking scheme in Screen Ireland at that point. So it had to be 10 minutes or less. And I had the idea for Catcalls, which was my next short, which was a horror. Because I had always loved horror, and Little Doll had been a kind of very straight up drama. Because in film school they taught us like make the prestige drama and then get in prestige festival, and that did work in fairness. But I knew in my heart like horror was where my like passion was, and that's where I like, you know, I felt most at home. Like I watched horror movies growing up like all the time. I read Stephen King like compulsively. Like I still will get, you know, watch any horror I can get my hands on and immerse myself in all that kind of thing. So I knew I really wanted to make a horror short film next, because I just wanted to start that trajectory, because I knew a few filmmakers that I had met along my travels that had basically made drama films and then found it quite hard to actually get the financing or the backing to do horror feature films, because it's kind of like, well, you know, making horror is an art in itself. You know, if you can make a really great drama film, it doesn't necessarily mean you can make a horror set piece that makes people afraid, or, you know, a good jump scare that gets people, you know, to jump out of their seats. So I knew I kind of would have to prove that within a short film before I could, because I had horror feature film ideas that I wanted to make, but I knew I would have to make a horror short before I did that. So I set about trying to do that. So I wrote Catcalls, or what was to be Catcalls, which was an idea I had around women reclaiming their power in a kind of a predator, like a prey and a predator situation. Because, you know, as a woman, I think, and a young woman at the time, I just felt frustrated by a lot of the stories I'd hear of my friends. And this was kind of pre-Me Too. So this was before it was kind of widely spoken about, but you knew of stories of people kind of being frightened or, you know, intimidated by men walking home, or things that have happened to them, you know, and it just made me really angry. And I wanted to make something that felt fun and kind of exciting, but it discussed those themes that I wanted to talk about. So I had this idea of, you know, a girl and she's walking around, these guys are intimidating her, but then, you know, it gets dark and then she turns into a monster, and then they're running from her rather than she's running from them. Yeah. And just kind of flip the tables a little bit. And I was trying to write this idea, and I found it kind of hard to boil it down into 10 minutes for this, you know, Screen Ireland scheme. And then while I was writing it, I had this really I'm going to say interesting there, but it's probably like a horrible thing. But I was walking home with my friend one night, and it wasn't late. It was only like 11 o'clock. And we were walking home together, and a guy pulled in and he asked us for directions. And when my friend went to the car, he was masturbating in his car. So he like sped off as soon as she like screamed to me. She was like, oh my God, oh my God. And then he like sped off in the car. I luckily like wrote down his license plate into my phone really quickly as he was driving off. So we were really close to my house. So we just like went into my house and we called the police, and they came and they talked to us, and we gave them the license plate number. And then a couple of days later, we had to go give our statements in the police station. And we basically were talking to the Garda who had come to the door. And he said that when he went to the guy's house, his wife opened the door, and the guy was just burst into tears behind her because he knew that he had been caught. And I just found it really, like, it was kind of exactly the themes that I wanted to tap into, that what happened to me, because it was like, in a moment, this guy is like intimidating us beyond belief, and like we fear the worst and we think our lives are in danger. But then, like, you know, 40 minutes later, the police arrive at his house and he's crying, which is like, you know, such a flip of like that situation. So I just found that like fascinating, and I was like, this is what the story is, like, this is what it has to be. So I wrote Catcalls, which is basically about these two girls who are walking home at night, and this guy pulls in, asks them for directions, and then he's masturbating, and then he drives off, but they follow him home, and he comes home to his wife and she's there, and these girls come to the house and they kind of pretend to the wife that they've been attacked or whatever. But basically the girls in the story, you can watch the short film after this, but they get their revenge. But the girls in the film are kind of shape-shifting cat women, and it's a play on the idea of the word cat calls. So I had this idea and it fit perfectly into 10 minutes, and it was just like, it's such a neat little script. So I gave it into Screen Ireland for their focus shorts funding, and they really liked it, and they really liked the themes, they really liked the ideas, and they kind of knew that I had done Little Doll before. Yeah, so we luckily got the funding to make Catcalls at that point, which was really cool. And just like, because I knew that was the kind of film that I wanted to make. Little Doll had been an expression of me, but I don't think it was like necessarily me exactly how I wanted it. I feel like Catcalls was much closer to kind of my personal style and my personal taste in terms of filmmaking, because I had kind of learned a bit more who I was at that point. I had been kind of done a lot of growing up, so I kind of knew what I wanted and knew how to get it. So that was like an amazing experience. And Catcalls then basically did an amazing run of festivals, a lot of genre festivals, which are kind of horror movie based, or like thrillers and action movies and stuff like that. So we did a lot of those kind of horror festivals in you know, Fantasia in Montreal, and Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas, and Sitges in Spain. And they were just, I feel like I got to go to Fantastic Fest in Austin, and as a horror lover and a horror filmmaker, it was just such a unifying experience to be like around that many people who loved the genre and loved horror movies as much as you. Because anyone you could stop and talk to and ask them what they'd seen that day, and you could just talk about horror movies with them for like 20 minutes, and it was an automatic way to kind of make a friend or make a connection with somebody, because you all had the same kind of tastes and ideas and, you know, stuff that you liked, and a lot of the same reference points. So I really enjoyed going there. And it was there that after playing at some of the kind of Montreal and the US festivals, the film Catcalls really kind of resonated with the US producers and that kind of stuff. So I started getting emails from people about representation. So that's how I met my US manager that I still have now. That was in that would have been 2018. So I met him through that kind of process of going to the film festivals. And yeah, so that was amazing. And then through Catcalls played at LFF that year, which is the London Film Festival, and that's where I met my UK agent as well. And my US manager did a kind of introduction to him. That's how I met him. And you know, then it was kind of all of a sudden, it was like the trajectory had gone quite fast from like, you know, being very DIY and just kind of struggling to, like, when I found out like Catcalls was kind of getting into festivals, I was still like trying to do jobs where I would make money in any way, like being an arts department trainee on a film, or, you know, all those kind of things, or like doing editing mixers for people or that kind of stuff. So it was like kind of a bit of a whirlwind then to be like in a position where you know, have representation and you have producers like that you can kind of send ideas to and all that kind of stuff. So then it was just like through I suppose that process with Catcalls, and then through kind of Screen Ireland knowing me, that then basically this Screen Ireland scheme came along called POV, which was the whole idea was that it was to upskill or kind of allow writer directors, specifically female writer directors, to go from shorts to their first feature films. So when I heard this scheme was coming along, I kind of felt like I was at the right level, because I had done catcalls with Screen Ireland, so they knew me and I knew some of the project managers in there at that stage, and had met a good few people within Screen Ireland. So I knew they knew who I was, and I knew that I had some ideas that I felt like could work. So the kind of catch, I suppose, with the POV scheme is that the budget is capped at €400,000. So it has to obviously be an idea that you think you can pull off for that, and that it will work within that. So it needs to be quite contained. I knew I wanted to make a horror film, but I knew it had to be something that could be within a kind of a contained space without too many characters, that could be pulled off for that budget. So that was kind of, I had a 1-page idea, which was extremely rough, which was this kind of take on the Changeling story, that played on the idea of, mental health, and how, I had read a lot of stories in folk history and folk horror of like, or folklore, sorry, about, people mistaking their loved ones for an entity in the past, and then committing heinous acts by like setting them on fire or drowning them in a river to test if they are this entity or not. But then that completely, obviously turning into a terrible tragedy. And it was like the effect of folk, like the folklore stories, on actual, real life stories and histories that I was reading about. I found them really impactful, and I just felt like that kind of idea was really interesting to me. So I had this kind of 1-page idea based on taking kind of the stories from folklore with kind of like the impacts of folklore on folk history, and then putting it in a very modern setting. Because I love folk horror, and I love kind of seeing Irish folklore in film, but I had felt it had been kind of predominantly rural settings. So I was like kind of, in kind of country towns, and like an English person arrives and then there's a curse on the forest and all that kind of thing. Which, don't get me wrong, I love those movies and I think they're done really well. But I just felt like I hadn't seen more urban folk story set in Ireland, and I really wanted to make that. So then I had this idea for You Are Not My Mother, and I submitted it to the POV scheme. So that was basically the next step on the rung. It was like to get towards doing your first feature film, and we submitted to POV at the end of 2018. So Catcalls was still kind of doing some festivals, and I was actually working on a feature film in the art department at the time, and I got a call on set saying that we had gotten to the next stage of the POV scheme, I think, possibly to go and basically do an interview. So we went in, me and my producer, and the producer was somebody I had met kind of through other people along the way, and I knew they had done kind of fantastic films, had done horror. And Dee Levens, who was the producer in there, she had never really done, she hadn't kind of been the main producer on a film yet, so it was kind of upskilling for her as well. So I think we were a good team to go into them. And so we got on to POV, which was a great process. It was an amazing scheme because Screen Ireland basically kept you in this kind of development bubble where it was just allowing you to write the script and pay you while you're writing, and also get you a script editor that they paid for. And kind of, it was a really like nice development process, because Screen Ireland, I felt like with our project anyway, they were like really not intrusive with too many notes and that kind of stuff. It was kind of allowing us to find the story with the script editor and just work through it. So the script, came quite quickly then, because we were on this very incubated development process. So we had the script in 2019, and basically I was working on the script for, I'd say, most of 2019, and our hope was to then make the film in 2020, but then obviously COVID came along. So kind of towards the end of 2019, I had this, like, the script was fully ready. It was ready to shoot, kind of like it had been through several drafts and iterations at that point, because it had been through like 8-9 months of development. And I was just, we were planning on shooting, we were going to shoot at the end of 2019, but then we just felt like we weren't quite ready yet. And then we were going to shoot in spring, so in March of 2020, but that obviously was like literally when COVID arrived.
Surprise!
Reared its head. So that was just like a bit of a spanner in the works, but I think it actually worked out well for us, because we got to do a bit more development on the script in the time that we were waiting. So we were going to shoot in spring of 2020. We actually then shot in November 2020. So it just gave us a few more months of prep and kind of crewing the film and finding the right cast and just kind of crewing up and getting everything right. And then, the added bonus is like, You're Not My Mother, it is set at Halloween. So it's about a young girl who lives in her grandmother's house with her mother, and her mother is kind of suffering with her mental health. So one day her mum goes missing, and the family kind of fear the worst at that point. But then she returns a day later, but her personality is like, but just becomes increasingly bizarre, and her behavior just becomes stranger and stranger. And then the protagonist, who's the 16-year-old girl, she realizes that her family has a history of basically dealing with these entities, kind of fairies within Irish folklore kind of history, and they have come back in the kind of form of her mother to lure her back and take her back to kind of the nether world, the other world, which appears in a lot of Irish folklore. So the film is set at Halloween, on Halloween week, to kind of add to the whole kind of folk element, because I think Samhain is like kind of amazing that Ireland, we kind of basically invented Halloween in many ways, or like Celtics did anyway. So I kind of wanted to include that in the story, because I also hadn't seen an Irish film that kind of had too many, can't think of one, but that did kind of have Halloween as a main focal point of the film too. And I love Halloween. Obviously, it's like my favorite holiday. So I thought, it's my first feature film, I can have it set at Halloween if I want. So so we were lucky then, actually, in a way, because in November 2020, obviously in November the leaves are still brown and like the natural landscape looks like Halloween, so we didn't have to kind of be finding leaves to throw on the road and that kind of stuff to make it look more like autumn. So it kind of all worked out for the best. And we got through the shoot kind of, thank God, without any kind of COVID impacting us in a major way at all. So we were lucky. We just had a great cast and crew, and they all worked really hard and just really pulled it off. So so then I was kind of in the edit process with that film, and I had another film that was in development, which I was writing the script for, called Silent Caller, which was another horror feature at the time. So I was kind of working on that while I was doing prep on You're Not My Mother, and when I was in the post-production of You're Not My Mother. So working as a writer as well as kind of finishing the directing job of my first feature. So that was kind of nice to have the mix. But so then we kind of finished You're Not My Mother, and we were very lucky to just last month we had our premiere of the film in TIFF. So that was like amazing to be at TIFF and have the film premiere there. It's obviously like an amazing festival. So we were in the Midnight Madness program of TIFF, which is also all the films play at midnight. They're mainly kind of genre horror films, and they're quite fun films, and they play at midnight. And obviously the audience is all kind of riled up and excited when they watch those movies. So we had a great time at that, and we actually got to go, which was amazing, because I know a lot of filmmakers recently like haven't really got to see their films in you know, in the kind of festivals where they're premiering at because of COVID. So we were very lucky that we had been all vaccinated, so we got to go and see the film with an audience and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I think that was kind of what brings us up until now. So everything that I'm working at the moment is obviously You're Not My Mother's kind of completed, so the work on that is mostly done, apart from kind of film festivals and that kind of thing. But I have two horror features in development in Ireland. One with Wild Atlantic Pictures, which is called Silent Caller, and then I've got one in very early development with Blinder Films as well. So I've been working as a writer on them, and with me hopefully to direct both of those as well. So it's kind of just waiting to see what happens with them, and what happens next. But from something like TIFF, it's great to kind of, because there's a lot of other projects now kind of that I get sent to read and that kind of thing, to kind of see what I want to do next and see what happens. But yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell how I got to where I am. And yeah, I think in terms of like horror filmmaking, I think it was always kind of like my major passion, because I just knew that's where my gut felt most safe and most comfortable, because I just knew the genre so well, because I'd seen so many horror movies. Like when I'm in a kind of an off mood, I'll put on a horror movie to watch to kind of comfort me, rather than like I don't know what other people put on, but I'll put on like John Carpenter's Halloween on an evening to just be like, I need to just relax and watch this. So I knew it was kind of my happy place. So I think it's always going to be a massive part of what I'm doing. And I feel like horror is really interesting as well at this time, because you can have messages and kind of ideas and themes that are sometimes very heavy to explore, like sexual harassment, or dealing with mental illness of a loved one. But with horror, you can explore those themes in a way where they are veiled by fun horror set pieces and excitement and kind of thrills and scares, that then an audience doesn't necessarily feel like they're watching something that is talking about something too heavy. I suppose it's kind of can be fun and can be exciting as well. So I think like that's why I've always really been drawn to horror. And I think some of the best films that kind of discuss like societal issues and things that are going on in our world are actually like can often be horror movies, because they kind of slip under the radar to discuss things that maybe a drama movie might be too dark, or might be too intense to explore those themes in. But yeah, so I think that's kind of me in a nutshell. I don't know if there's any questions, or if you have any questions for me or anything like that.
Yeah, I was thinking yesterday that the movie I told you, The Cat Calls, affected me in a way, because I think almost every woman in the world has such an experience, same experience, and I don't know. I'm angry about it.
Yeah, no,
And
definitely.
I wish I had some superpowers to be able to beat them all.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I think as a woman, sometimes in this world, you can feel quite powerless. I think, particularly, I know there's been some stories of, women in the UK recently, like Sarah Everard and Sabina Nessa, who were just walking home at night, not even late, and, were murdered. And as a woman reading those stories, it's like so affecting and impactful, because they're you know, it's real life horror, it's real life terror, and like it impacts you like in your everyday, where you
Yeah,
walk or what you do. You know, I've, you know, taken routes that are 20 minutes out of my way if I see a guy who's standing in the lane that I have to walk down, because I'm not going to walk through there if he's there. Do you know what I mean? And he might be completely harmless. He might be fine, but I'm not going to take that risk because I don't want to put myself through that. And those are the kind of realities of just being a woman. And yeah, I think there's definitely those themes I will be exploring again in films that I make in the future for sure.
yeah, but I think society doesn't care a lot. For example, I was in a train a couple of years ago, and I was going for holidays. So I was with my best friend Irini, laughing, cheering. Okay, we're going to an island, and in that train there was a guy who who was looking at us. It was 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, and he started masturbate
Oh
himself,
God.
and we didn't know what to do. And then we stopped and we get off of the train, and it was a guard, and we told him that, that man inside that train, he masturbates himself, and we don't know what to do. And he told us, oh, he was screaming, moaning, something like that. No. Okay, it's fine then. Okay, he's just crazy. And then I wished I had superpowers. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it because it makes me very angry.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I'm sorry that happened to you. It's just such a
I have a lot
horrible
of
experience.
experiences, a lot.
Yeah, yeah, same,
Don't
same.
worry.
Yeah,
Even from my family.
yeah, yeah. I think it's
Yes.
like, you know, it's, yeah, it's pretty dark if you kind of think about it too much. You have to kind of try and see all the good in the world and the good people as well, because I think
Yeah.
if you focus on it, it can kind of get to you.
I was thinking
Yeah.
how the mans they realize all the stuff. For example, the actors in the actor and the catwalk.
Yeah.
How he feel about that? Because men, I think that they doesn't have such an experience. So how will they feel about the subject?
The main actor in Catcalls who played the kind of pervert in the movie, it was actually a really hard role to cast because a lot of men didn't who came in to read. We did a kind of an audition, but we also sent the script out to a few actors, and a lot of men didn't want to be involved with it because they
Mhm.
didn't want to be seen to be a pervert in the film, or like, you know, kind of do that role, because it was very dark and they didn't like the idea. um and we were just lucky that we had an audition with one man. He came in, and his name was Martin, and he was just the sweetest guy in the world. Like, he was just such a really kind of smart, like, you know, really sweet guy. And he nailed the audition. He really got it. And me and him had lots of conversations about like why somebody would do this, and he was just like, you know, he really empathized with women and myself, and, you know, the
Mhm.
story I had told him and how it all came about. um and yeah, he was just kind of, it really was hard for him, I think, to kind of really try and understand why somebody would do that. So it was a lot of work for him, and just kind of figuring that out and trying to find out who the character was and who the person was apart from the act that they're doing. Because the scariest part is that, you know, to me, I think this like most horrific thing, and the most kind of thing I like to base any horror that I'm doing on, is like the banality of evil, and like how people who are evil aren't kind of like twirling their mustaches and like gonna tie you to the train tracks. They're like your next door neighbor, or they're like, you know, your family member, and they're people who have lots of good aspects to them and kindness, and, you know, in some cases like can be really good people, but then they can do terrible things. And it's just like, I think as human beings it's such a hard thing to make sense of, because it's just easier to say that person's bad, but to know that somebody has duality to them is the most disconcerting, because then you kind of go, well, anyone can be bad, anyone can do a terrible thing. And I think that's like really interesting. It's just like the banality of it, because it's just like somebody that can be so intimidating or do something so predatory, or then has a completely different life where they're just like have a wife and maybe children, and they bring their children to the playground. It's just like the most bizarre thing in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that very interesting. It's kind of totally weird. Yeah. Awesome.
But let's talk more about techniques. I mean, okay, let's say that I want to be a filmmaker, a director, and I want to make horror films. So, what are the elements?
I mean the I think
Music, for example, music.
yes, yeah,
Integral part.
Very integral, yeah. And I think sometimes the lack of music, actually, I think in horror movies, what I've learned from this, projects that I've done, is that first things first, I think story needs to be like anything that I'm making. I make from things that genuinely scare me. Do you know what I mean? So I think if you're a horror filmmaker, you need to tap into what is your kind of primal fears, what are your biggest fears, and how do you interpret them into like a story that can be told on screen and visualized. And I think that's, if you start there, you'll get somewhere really scary, because the content will scare you on some level, so it will come across on the screen. So I think with your story first, and then obviously, like, depending, like, horror is such a vast genre, and there's many subgenres within horror, so you kind of need to figure out what is your horror movie. So it's like, is this a supernatural movie, which is like ghosts, or things that we can't tangibly make sense of, or is it kind of a slasher movie, which is like, a serial killer running around trying to kill you, or is it kind of a creature feature? Is there a monster? There's some sort of, beast or something that's going to get you, and kind of breaking it down into the subgenres. Then I feel like for me, what it was then, like, I had obviously like watched a lot of horror, but I think if you find your subgenre and watch movies within that subgenre, and you study them and you see how they work, because like each subgenre works kind of differently, because a ghost movie will have different ways to set up a scare than a movie with a monster, because a monster is going to like be running around chasing you. Like, people who watch like a slasher movie, they want gore, they want people to be like stabbed and blood squirting everywhere, and you need to deliver those things for that audience. So you need to go like, who's my audience, what's my subgenre of horror, and how do I deliver to the audience what they want? Because horror, I am a horror audience member, so whenever I'm making anything, I want it to, it's like, what would I want to see? What would I want to see in this kind of movie? Would I want to see blood here? Maybe not. Would I? Maybe like a big squirt of blood. So you kind of have to see who your audience is, what your subgenre is. But then I think tapping into like your set pieces. So a set piece is like a sequence, or a long scene or a couple of scenes that run together that basically set up a scare or something that is scary. Because even with psychological horror movies, which don't necessarily have a ghost or a scary entity that's going to come into your room at night, you'll still have kind of a set of scenes or a sequence that will set up attention. So it's kind of like a joke. So basically it goes like, you're building up to a punchline and then you deliver it. But this track upward to build the tension is the most important part, because in horror movies you can have a cat, or you can have like a person in a mask jump out and play a really loud like jing of music, and that will give a person a fright in an audience for 1 second. But to really give a sustained feeling of fear to an audience member as they're watching a film, you need to build it up and build that up, so that people are waiting for a payoff, but then you might not necessarily deliver it to them, or you might wait a little bit longer. You might kind of play with their expectations of what they're about to see. So if, somebody's opening a mirror and you're expecting to see somebody here, they're not there. They're actually here. It's kind of like misdirection, like a little magic trick of like, what is the audience expecting? And how do I subvert that and make it kind of change, or, to be something else? So I think that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of horror filmmaking, is like how to like develop those scares and how to kind of set them up and pay them off. So it is like a joke. It's like can be quite technical, and I think then what will come into it is the kind of technical aspects, like music. Like in some scenes that we've done where we've set up scares, you'll drop all the music out completely and sound, so that it's very, very quiet. So then the audience is kind of subconsciously like knows that there's something that they're waiting for.
Usually at that point, I am beginning to swear a lot. Come on, mother, blah blah blah. Come on, where are you?
Yeah, so I think that's so important, and just like setting up that kind of tension and payoff, and then you've got your kind of technical aspects on how to do that with music or with your camera angle. I feel like in horror as well, like having negative space, so having like a character who's slightly off frame, so then this all behind them is in darkness, so then you're kind of offering a space where something could come out and like kind of come out of the darkness and scare them. So an audience is kind of checking every corner for the character in the film, if you know what I mean. So it kind of puts them in their shoes as much as possible. But yeah, I think there's like, I know there's lots more kind of intricate details, but I think like with the horror, horror is so broad as well. And I think as long as you're making something that is tapping into kind of true fear, and it's not just trying to like make a film with a ghost for no reason, I think you need to tap into like what's really scary, what's really kind of primal about what you're afraid of. And then once you have that, the nuts and bolts of how to set that up kind of come naturally once you kind of do your homework and watch a lot of horror, and you kind of see how they kind of set things up or how things are done. But yeah.
Can a horror movie be made in a completely sunlight, morning light?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's
because usually are only at night.
Yeah, sometimes, but there's movies like The Wicker Man, Midsommar, Rosemary's Baby. There's lots of movies that are take place predominantly in daylight, like daylight horror. And I think a lot of the time with those movies, they're kind of playing with the psychological horror of the main character's perspective, and then being in a kind of a situation that is contrasting with this daylight. So the daylight becomes kind of obscene in a way, because they're kind of dealing with something that's in complete opposition with that. So it kind of makes it more scary that it's not at nighttime, if you get me. Yeah. But yeah, I think, is that time, or we kind of, I feel like there's nobody here anymore, is there? But yeah, is there any kind of other things you wanted to know or ask?
The truth is, I'm a big fan of horror movies, and usually I can't find someone to watch them with me because they're afraid.
Yeah.
And I have one friend, Vicky, and she lives in Spain, but wherever she comes to Greece, we're okay. Now we're gonna see in a row horror movies. So usually, I do like a lot of films that they have plot twists.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's an interesting end. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think having somebody to watch your horror movie with is very important. It's a very communal experience, I think, and it's really nice. I think horror movies, because they are one of the few films, I think, that will withstand the kind of lack of people going to the cinema for a cinematic experience, because obviously people going to the cinema has kind of gone down since COVID, but I think horror movies are such a strong contender for a film to be seen with an audience, because having a communal experience at a horror movie with people is like you want somebody beside you and you want somebody next to you in that moment. So I think, I think it will withstand the kind of cinema. Sometimes I think sometimes cinema is kind of declining, but I think horror movies will